Hi everyone, this is Matt. Welcome back to my channel. Today I want to talk to you about writing a literature review. So, when I was an academic, I wrote a lot of reviews and I marked a lot of students, right? I marked their literature reviews. And when I left academia, I actually became a professional scientific writer. So, there is quite a lot I can tell you about this. And the very first message I want to share with you is that the purpose of writing a literature review is to analyze and summarize relevant literature on a specific topic, to find patterns, to find trends, to find research gaps, and suggest future experiments. So you start very broad with all of this literature and you summarize it and you analyze it until you get to the very tip of that pyramid, which is the research gap, the trends, the patterns, suggestions for future experiments. And in this day and age, you can use AI platforms to write a literature review for you, or at least you can use them to help you write one. Now, I would definitely suggest to use AI to help you write one rather than to write it for you, because at least in the UK, the universities are getting software that can detect AI generated text, and they will fail you for plagiarizing if you just use AI to write an essay for you. However, you can still use AI to help you write an excellent literature review. So I wanted to check this idea, and I am an expert in RNA DNA hybrids, right? So this is my field of expertise, and then I went to lots of different AIs like Jenny, like Cite AI, Copy AI, ChatGPT, ChatPDF, and so on. And I asked them to write at least an outline or a full literature review on RNA DNA hybrids because this is my field. And I can tell you straight away, ChatGPT is great for getting an outline for your literature review. However, the outline it will give you will be like at a very, very much PhD level, PhD thesis level. So if you're writing master's thesis, or if you're writing your literature review as an undergrad student, then ChatGPT might give you something that is a little bit too complex, a little bit too comprehensive. Now, on the other hand, ChatGPT is absolutely great for definitions. So if you don't understand something, if you need a definition of a specific term, then ChatGPT will definitely help you with this. I wouldn't ask ChatGPT for any references because the references it gave me didn't exist or were not particularly helpful. And finally, they were all quite old, unfortunately. So I'd say ChatGPT for the outline, but it's going to be PhD thesis level outline. Now, Jenny is a great AI platform, and Jenny will write a whole research paper, a whole literature review for you. However, when I asked Jenny to write a literature review on RNA DNA hybrids, it actually made a mistake in the third sentence. Okay, so really early on. And I didn't like the references it used because they were mostly um, review papers. And what we really want to see in a literature review is not review papers being cited, but original research papers being cited. And again, they were all quite old. I think when I asked for it, the newest paper that was there was from 2019. So that wasn't okay. And also, um, all the big papers that I can think of, the big names, were not cited. So that also wasn't okay. So again, I would only use Jenny for the outline and for definitions. But again, this outline will be very much PhD thesis level, very comprehensive and complex. So be careful with that. I also checked Copy AI. I had similar feelings about it, and I used Cite as well, Cite AI. However, the problem with Cite is that you have to pay for Cite. And when I was a PhD student, I didn't have much money. So as a PhD student, I wouldn't use Cite AI because I wouldn't want to pay extra for another thing. Or when I was an undergrad student, same thing. I wouldn't want to pay. So this is why I wouldn't encourage anyone to go to Site AI because I don't know your situation, you may not be able to pay for it or may not want to pay for it. And that's absolutely okay. After all, we're all students, so we're not really making any money. So that's fine. However, another software that I used was called ChatPDF. Now, ChatPDF is supposed to explain to you papers that you don't understand. So you feed it with a PDF copy of your paper of interest, and you ask specific questions about this paper. And ChatPDF will tell you, will read this paper, and it will give you the answers in a more digestible language. And I can tell you straight away, I loved it. It was so good. I would totally recommend it. I didn't find any mistakes, and ChatPDF gave me some good references to other papers. Everything was correct. Remember, I was asking ChatPDF about papers that I have 8-9 years of expertise in, right? I have 8-9 years of expertise in this field. So if ChatPDF was wrong about something, I would be very likely to spot it. And I didn't spot anything. So I would definitely recommend using ChatPDF if you don't understand the paper, if you don't understand a section of a paper, and you want to find a quick explanation. The next platform that I would use is actually not an AI, it's a dictionary. It's called Ozdic. Ozdic is a dictionary for non-native English speakers to help them write and sound more like native English speakers. And it's designed for researchers. It's a really good platform, it's really helpful, and I would definitely recommend everyone to use Ozdic. Um, and then finally, you absolutely need a reference software manager like Mendeley or Zotero. When I was an academic, I used to use Mendeley. Now, as a professional writer, I use Zotero. Honestly, I can't tell you which one is better. I think they're both very similar. They are both great, and you can play with both of them and pick which one you prefer. However, whichever one you get, you also need to get 2 plugins. So both Mendeley and Zotero have plugins for your internet browsers, so that when you find a paper online, you can just hit export to Mendeley desktop or Zotero desktop, and automatically this paper will be added to the list of the papers you have within Mendeley or Zotero. And then you need to get another plugin, which is also for free. All of that is for free. Um, and I'm not paid by either Mendeley or Zotero, by the way. I honestly recommend them. I think they're both great software. So what we also have is Word plugins, Microsoft Word plugins, so that you can directly insert citations from Mendeley or Zotero into your Word document. So this is what you need to get. So all in all, I would definitely recommend to using ChatGPT, Copy AI, or Jenny for outlines. Okay, this is what I would use. Then I would use Ozdic to help me with language. I would use ChatPDF to help me with the papers I don't understand, and I would use Mendeley and Zotero with references. So now let's move on and talk about actually writing the literature review. The very first thing you need to do is you need to identify keywords within your title. So to give you as an example, when I was an undergrad student, I was asked to write a literature review on inactivation of X chromosomes in mammals. This was the title of my literature review. Now, the keyword here is inactivation of X chromosome. Now, the keyword potentially could be X chromosome, but that is way too generic. Now, mammals is also way too generic. What you're really looking for is something quite specific, like inactivation of X chromosome. So this is your keyword, key phrase, and now you need to think of any synonyms. And a synonym could be potentially deactivation of X chromosome. So you have these two key phrases that you're going to use in your search. So the next step is the database. In my opinion, you should actually use 2 types of databases. One that is very generic, like Google Scholar. Google Scholar is a great database with loads and loads of papers. And the other database you should use should be specific to your field of research. So for example, within biology or within medical sciences, PubMed is absolutely great, and I have the most experience with PubMed. If you're doing anything that is history related, for example, it will be JTO. If you're doing something that is education related, it will be Eric, and so on. There are so many of them, and you just need to use the one that is specific to your own field. So in my case, I always used Google Scholar and I used PubMed. Now, I will use PubMed as an example because I'm the most familiar with PubMed. And what is so great about it is that you can set up inclusion and exclusion criteria for the search. Okay, so when you're starting your search and you're looking for the first papers, you use these key phrases, keywords that you have. But what you really want to find are the most recent literature reviews, published review papers. This is what you want because you want to have an overview of the whole field and you want to learn about the current state of knowledge or the state of knowledge that was up to the point when this paper was published. So you feed PubMed or whatever is your database with your key phrase, with your keyword, and then you set up the inclusion exclusion criteria. So what you really want to do is you want to look for papers from the last 5 years. In PubMed, you can specifically search for review papers, which is so useful. You can make sure that they're all in English as well, okay? And then you're gonna get lots of papers that will come up with the reviews from the last 5 years. And maybe, maybe you'll just have 10 of them, maybe you'll have 20 of them, maybe there will only be 2. I don't know. It will really depend. But the point is, you want to pick the most relevant ones and the ones that were published in really good papers. And you can judge whether a paper is good or not by the impact factor. The higher the impact factor of the journal the paper is published in, then the more reliable as a source of information that paper is going to be. Okay, so pick the top 5 papers, top 5 review papers that you get there and start reading them. Okay, as you read them, you will immediately notice that there is a certain way people divide the topic, and they might divide it thematically or chronologically, for example. So the topic I just chose to discuss was inactivation of X chromosome in mammals. So, this could be divided by maybe different types of inactivation of the X chromosome, or maybe could be divided by inactivation of X chromosome in different animals. So, for example, how do mice do it? How do humans do it? How do chimpanzees do it? And so on. So you will immediately see how people divide on this topic, and you will also see the papers they cite, right? So as you're reading your literature review, highlight all of the relevant papers these people cited, and then find them as well and import them into your reference software manager, Mendeley or Zotero, whatever you use, okay? And by starting with maybe 5 papers, you will grow your database of papers, into potentially even hundreds of papers. It will be like a growing snowball. And that is a great way to grow your reference list. Oh, and a really good point here is that, for example, if your newest literature review is 2 years old, then you have that gap, right? So you need to go back and use your key phrases, key words, and search for the papers that were published in the last 2 years, that are original research papers that were published in English, for example, and read them too. And in this way, you'll have a complete list of all of the relevant papers on your topic. Now, let's go a little bit deeper on reading the papers. And my top tip, and I think this is the top tip any academic would tell you, don't read the whole paper. We never do. I can't remember the last time I read a whole paper. All you need to read is just the sections that are relevant to you. So when I was an academic, when I was a researcher, I would only usually read the abstract and I would look at the figures. And sometimes I would actually read some text in the discussion. But otherwise, I was just looking at the figures. That's all I used to do. But in your case, you need to look at the paper and you need to decide which sections are actually relevant to you, relevant to the topic, and only read these. So save your time and don't read the whole thing, because you don't need to know everything. You only need to know a couple of key things that are related to your paper. So as you are reading these papers, you need to start dividing them, for example, thematically. So in my case, if we're still talking about inactivation of the X chromosome in mammals, I would create some subfolders in Mendeley or Zotero, and it would be humans, chimpanzees, mice, and so on. And for example, if this paper was talking about how this process occurs in chimpanzees, I would drag it to this folder, humans to that folder, and so on, okay? And then as I would read these papers, I would start making notes within my reference software, right? So within Mendeley or within Zotero. And all you want here is just a couple of bullet points per paper. Really, that's absolutely enough. Key bullet points that are related to your literature review title. And then, as you are doing this, you will start organizing these papers. And then it will be so much easier to actually find papers that you need for a specific section. It will be so much easier to browse through them and find that key information that you need to use. So this is how you're actually going to grow a database that is useful, that you can browse through, and you can quickly use when writing your literature review. Once you finish reading all of these papers and taking notes, now take a step back and think really hard about what is the best way to describe this topic. What is the best way to organize all of your thoughts, all of the ideas, all of the data that was described in these papers? And look at the literature reviews that you read, because maybe you could just follow whatever people already did. So if they divided the topic thematically, maybe you could do the same thing. That's absolutely fine. I mean, it makes sense, right? You don't really need to justify yourself because other people did it already and published these papers. However, on the other hand, maybe you don't want to do what other people did. You want to do something new, and you can justify this. Well, you will have to justify this by saying, for example, that you are doing this to identify a new research gap. And that's absolutely fine. But if you do something different to what was already done, that you will have to justify your logic. So bear this in mind and think really hard how you want to organize this information so that it flows from a section to a section and then create a table of contents. Now, really think hard and take your time to create this, because a table of contents that flows very well, but clearly has a merit and is taking you somewhere very specific, will get you extra points later, will make writing so much easier, and really it will be a great use of your time. And if you don't understand maybe some papers, or you're struggling with that outline, remember you can use ChatGPT with the papers. You can use ChatPDF with understanding the papers. You can use ChatGPT or Jenny to help you with the outline. But absolutely take your time, because it will save you so much work later and it will get you extra credit if your literature review is organized in a logical manner. Okay, so once you have your table of contents, you need to start filling it up with information, right, from the specific papers. Now, it will be really easy to find these papers because you already have them categorized in your Mendeley or Zotero, and it's really easy to browse through them and find the key points. Okay, so now as you are writing this, remember that you need to stay relevant. So it's a really good point, it's a really good idea to write the topic, the title of your review in the header of every page in your Word document, so that it is in front of you all the time, you can see it and you stay on track. Because remember, every time you go off topic, you will be marked down, you will lose points. What is, what is so common is that we like to write about things we're interested in, but we're not necessarily on topic. And this is something you really need to be careful about. And another good way to make sure that you don't go off topic is to only write 1 or 2 sentences paper. And honestly, 1 or 2 sentences are enough to describe the key points from specific papers, from a specific paper that that you want to include in your literature review. And this sounds really harsh, but I can also summarize my own research papers, my own nature research papers, in a sentence or 2 sentences, because these are just the key information, the gist of it. If someone wants to learn more, then they will go to the paper, you will provide the reference. However, the review is supposed to be broad and you're supposed to summarize the whole literature. So really 1 or 2 sentences per paper is what you should be aiming for. And if you want to talk more about the paper, then this might be okay in some situations, but you need to justify it. And for example, if you want to talk about limitations of that paper, or you want to talk about future implications of that paper, then that's okay. Then you can write a couple of sentences more. But otherwise, you should really keep it quite short and sweet per paper. Then make sure that as you are writing section to section, paragraph to paragraph, sentence to sentence, everything flows in a logical manner. That's so important. Words like moreover, however, on the other hand, hence, nevertheless, are absolutely key to maintain logical flow, to allow the reader, to make it so much easier for the reader to understand how you're moving from one thought to another, from one idea to another idea. And this is the difference between an outstanding literature review and a very good literature review, how well it flows. And honestly, when I was an academic, this was the difference between giving a student the top mark and the mark just below. So really, it's all about the flow. Once you have the information and it's all correct, it's really about how it's all connected to each other. Ozdic dictionary might help you with this. Well, I'm sure it will help you with this because again, it was designed to help non-native English speakers to speak and to write, to sound more like natural native English speakers. So that's definitely useful, and I would definitely use Ozdic to help you with writing. Then you will have your references, right? But you will use a reference software manager, so this will be really quick. And then finally, we really need to talk about the language you're going to use. So the language of your literature review should be simple and accessible, and that's really, really important. So the first draft that you will write doesn't have to be perfect and shouldn't be, because you shouldn't spend a lot of time trying to perfect your literature review, because essentially you will lose time, you will get stuck, and it will be just basically a waste of your time. So it's better to create first draft, which is, pretty good but not perfect, then step aside for a day, come back to it, work on it again to improve the flow. Again, use Ozdic to help you with this. Maybe use ChatGPT or Jenny if there are short sections that you want to rephrase, that you want to find ways to write them, to make them shorter. However, again, you're risking plagiarizing here. So I would be very careful about this. And if you need help from software about writing itself, then this should be a very short section. Because then, even if it's flagged up um, later as plagiarized, hopefully it will be so short, no one will actually pay attention to it. So I'll be just careful about this, but definitely use Ozdic to help you with improving the flow. And then once you perfect your draft and you have your draft 2, then give it to a friend who is not an expert in your field, and make sure that, and then later once they read it, ask them some questions, make sure they understood your literature review. And what is really key here, ask them to summarize your literature review, and then you will see what they remembered, what got stuck in their head. And in this way, you will know what you have explained very well and what you haven't. And if I remembered the key points that you wanted the reader to note, then that's brilliant. But if you remember some obscure facts that maybe are not that relevant to the whole topic, then it's worth going back and working on the text again to stress these key points a bit more, to make it a bit more clearer for a reader that this is what is important, this is the take-home message. And in this way, you will improve the flow and you will make sure that you get that top highest mark that you can. And this is all of my advice for you. If you benefit from this content, please subscribe and I will see you in the next one.